Hi, everyone. Welcome back to this week's episode of the PETHS Alumni Network podcast. I'm your host, Nathan, and today we're joined by Mya Medeiros. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing,
Yeah,
Nathan?
I'm good. Thank you so much for taking the time. So we talked a bit offline. You went to Cal somewhere as well. You then graduated from PET in 2022. Now you're at the Schulich School of Business at York University. We talked a little bit offline. You're working at BMO on their sales and trading team. So we'll definitely talk about that. Lots to talk about in terms of finance, things like that. But
Finance.
yeah, so starting back, in high school from the very beginning, do you have any standout moments, classes, anything like that?
Um, two, two
Yeah.
classes in particular. Anything to do with woodshop was my favorite class. Mr. Apostolakos is the best teacher, one of the best teachers ever. I really found an appreciation for like working with your hands and woodworking in that class. And honestly, it was a very realistic career option for me. I really was interested in carpentry because of those courses. So I took it all 4 years. That was like my first elective and last. Um, and another class that really stood out to me too was Mr. Shields' Intro to Business, and then Mr. Shields' um, his capital markets course, which honestly I need to reconnect with him because he basically changed my life. Um, Unbelievably real man. He helped me set up my TFSA. He helped me do research for my first investments into ETFs. He honestly, like, a lot of my career and my personal finance is owed to Mr. Shields. So,
Yeah,
big
yeah,
shout out that guy.
yeah. It's amazing to hear you had, great role models at school. Pet has a lot of great teachers. But those sound like two kind of almost polar opposite kind of classes, right? Like one is very hands-on, like you mentioned, the other one is very technical, working with money, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
So I guess was that like kind of the foundation for your decision to pursue business? Sounds like, you're interested in the finance kind of thing. Was that
Mhm.
like the first point where you realized that you wanted to study business?
Mhm. One of the things I realized was when I was in grade 10, I was taking both of those courses, the Intro to Business course as well as the Woodshop course. And like those are the best grades that I will ever get in the history of my life. So from there, I basically decided I want to do a career that I'm really good in. Clearly, I'm good in business or in woodshop, and carpentry is something that I was very passionate about, but it wasn't something that I could see giving a proper return in the long run because I wanted to run my own business if I was doing carpentry, but I needed business foundations in order to do that. So originally, my plan was actually to continue taking woodshop and business courses and then go into a business school, develop a background in finance, particularly just because for me, one, like finance and woodshop is very similar in that it's very hands-on. In my head, I can print money. I can't like it's very I can see the dollars moving in my account. I can see the money going up and down like stocks. Like you can print like deeds for bonds or like the agreements for bonds, it's very realistic to me. So that's why it was kind of related, but that's why I ended up going into finance was because I wanted to be really comfortable with the harder things of owning a business. And then from there, I was introduced to like sales and trading and investment banking and capital markets. And it was very interesting to me and hyper competitive, which is something that I really thrive in or get energized by. So that's how I kind of ended up in finance and like business school. But my original plan was to do business school and then start my own carpentry business.
Yeah, from a very, biased perspective, that I have, also being in business. Yeah, I think like at the end of the day, like business is what kind of drives the world in a way. So, yeah, I totally agree with that point that, if you want to run your own business, it's good to have, a broader understanding of how these things work, right? And it can kind of supplement, your technical skills in woodwork.
Mhm.
So you mentioned, from that point, you decided you want to go to business school. What was kind of your process like in deciding where to go?
I feel as though I would not recommend the way that I went about it. But truthfully, I'm in a long-term relationship with my boyfriend ever since I was in grade 10. And I knew that I wasn't going to go outside. So I, in December, as everything was due, basically, maybe November, I looked up best business school in Toronto and I didn't take calculus. So it was basically Schulich. And so I really like the color blue. So I decided I'm gonna go to Schulich because I really want to wear the merch because I look really nice in blue. And to that point, I actually was working at a blue company too. I was working at Hyundai. So I was like, I'm just gonna keep the blue theme going. And then I also applied to Ted Rogers and Laurier. I applied to Ted Rogers because I felt comfortable that I knew I would get in. And then Laurier because my parents went. So I was like, I guess I'll just show them that I'm able to get in. But honestly, if I didn't get into Schulich, I was very interested in just skipping the business part and going straight into like the trades and becoming a carpenter. So I said, if I don't get into Schulich, I'm going to become a carpenter.
Mm.
So it was very like I applied to the minimum amount of schools. I went there because I just looked at best school. And then I didn't take calc, so I couldn't go
Yeah.
to Rotman.
Right.
So that was like my thought process.
Yeah. Very, very candid, very candid
Yeah.
take. So yeah, I guess, that provides a valuable lesson, to others, I guess. As
Do
much as
more
it,
research.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
I would say do more research.
yeah.
I'm happy with my decision, but
Mhm.
like I would say do more research.
Yeah, so it worked out for you in the end, and you've been able to, it sounds like you've been having a good time there. Like how would you kind of describe the experience there? Like if you were to kind of like sell someone on going to Schulich, like how would you kind of sell it to them?
Um, Let me preface this by
Yeah.
saying the Schulich that is today, the Schulich that is the incoming classes in the past 2 years that are ahead of me. So classes of 2027, 2028, and they're on are having a very different experience than I am because Schulich is changing their structure. But for my experience, if I could sell my experience, I would say that Schulich is everything good about high school, small class sizes with less than 50 people basically for every class, um, specialized, caring, like unbelievably intelligent professors. Like all of my professors are at like Big Four. If we're doing accounting course, they've been like a partner at EY. Like they know their stuff. And it's like it's just a very warm environment. I've heard of the other top schools like I'm not going to name names, but it's not as collaborative of an environment. A lot of the time, like immediately group chats are made to say, "Oh, does anyone want to study?" Or, "Oh, I had some trouble on this question." 6 people will help you. If you sit anywhere at Schulich, someone will join you. Someone will talk to you, and you will meet friends that you never really had the intention of making. Like I talk to everyone, so I'm always like intentionally trying to make friends, but like, I've never felt as supported, um, by so many super intelligent people that are really just trying to work hard, and I've never been met with someone who's like, I feel like there's a competitive edge, and that's something that I really appreciate, especially knowing that, like, Schulich has a terrible reputation with York students
Yeah.
that were, like, bleeps and all that
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
So I was really surprised. I'm very happy with my whole like decision.
I feel like that's kind of an experience that like every business school has, I feel like at any school, U of T kids don't like Rotman kids. UBC kids don't like solder kids. Even at
Yeah.
Ivy too, as much as it pains me to say. But as much as the environment, you said has been very supportive of you, you've also given back. You've started your own club association. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so last semester during my third year first semester, I started York Asian Society. Um, I had thunk it 6 months prior to when it was officially ratified by the York University, and it was because I was walking with one of my Asian friends, fully Asian friend, and there was a Chinese association booth. And I was like, I want to join because both of my grandparents on my maternal side are Chinese. They're both half Chinese, and I'm very close with them. Like I lived with them all the time that I was in Castlemore, and halfway through high school, I lived with them for many years. And being Chinese and Asian is a very big part of my life, and being Lao and Vietnamese, like, and I really wanted to be a part of a community. And when I was met with like, oh, can I join? And they said, oh, well, we kind of only talk in Mandarin, so unless you can speak, and I don't speak Mandarin. They said, well, like, I don't think you can join then. But then they asked my friend who's beside me, who's visibly fully Chinese, they said, oh, but you can join. And then he said, I don't speak Mandarin. And they said, that's okay.
Oh,
I was
yeah,
kind of ticked off because I was like,
yeah,
right here.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
you could have waited a bit, you know?
yeah,
Um, so I am, as you can tell by how I picked my school, I'm very a kind of I throw stuff at the wall and see if it sticks. So I was like, I'm gonna start an Asian society. What are they gonna do about it?
yeah, mhm,
So I called up one of my friends named Ada. And I said, hey, do you want to like start an Asian society? And she said, sure. And so for the next 4 months, we basically just did it. Like there was no forethought, there was no brainstorming. It was kind of just like, well, let's email the school, see what we have to do.
right. Yeah, I'm glad you talked about, inclusion, community, finding a way to fix a problem that you see exists. That's very, business minded, entrepreneurial minded, things
So
like that, right?
business.
Yeah. So, talking more on the professional side, right? So you've had a few internships at BMO, obviously a very huge, respectable, Canadian bank. Your first internship was in private wealth, and you more recently transitioned over to sales and trading, right? Which
Mhm.
I understand too. A lot of non-business kids, that sounds like a bunch of mumbo jumbo, right? But
Yeah.
yeah, I guess what's the experience been like at BMO? We talked a little bit offline. You said the culture is really great, right? How has it been like? How would you characterize the culture there?
Um, I had been at another
Yeah,
corporate company for my first internship out of first year, you know,
yeah,
a
mhm,
certain company
yeah,
perhaps,
yeah,
right?
mhm,
And it was a very different experience. Like BMO and Bell are both very historical companies. They've literally been a part of the building of Canada. They're like hundreds years old. I don't like fact check that.
yeah,
But they're very old companies. And one thing that I really appreciate about BMO is as new people coming in, you are encouraged to bring new ideas. And this is one company where they're going to listen and they're going to do something about it. Like this is one of those things where I'm constantly encouraged to bring up like how I'm feeling like private wealth. I was working with trust and estates. So we have like trust officers that after someone is passing, they deal with the finances and they deal with like the trust and estates and they even do like escrow and all that types of business, right? And even in that business where you would assume like it's a slower business, people are dying, right? I was still encouraged, like, do you think these account opening forms are like less than ideal? Like, what do you think we can do? And he was so energetic. And that's something that has even continued moving into capital markets and sales and trading. I'm like constantly encouraged by all of my leadership, like from my like VP to my MD and my head MD, like constantly like, that's such a great idea, Maya. Like the way that
yeah,
like I made one macro and I was so proud of it
yeah.
and they were so proud of me and they were so
Mhm.
happy to use it. And I was just it's a very encouraging culture.
Yeah, that amazing to hear. Everyone I think strives to end up at a place like that, right? And
Mhm.
I'm more on the very like business financy side. So you started at Bell, which is like one company, you're dealing with a single company and their finances, right? And then you move to private wealth, which is like you said, like a trust fund, things like that. And then you move to S&T, which is like you're more at like a 30,000 foot view where you're looking at huge corporations, you're selling to them, right? Is that kind of how you would characterize the difference between those kind of internships?
The way that my internships were
Yeah.
so different. Like
Yeah.
Bell, I was actually helping with talent acquisition for the technology, for network technology services. And so it was a lot of like improving the new grad and intern program. It was a lot of like I helped with the recruitment, I helped with um, setting up events for the new grad students. I was able to meet like the CTIO, I was able to meet like the VPs. It was an incredible experience. But I could see that I wanted a little bit more of a competitive environment, something that they were constantly like aiming to get better and get more. And that's why I decided to go on to the more revenue generation side, like private wealth. And then when I was in private wealth, as I was in like trust and estates, um, BMO has its own trust business, so it's called BMO Trust Co. Technically, I was in a different company, um, but it's BMO, you know what I mean?
Mm,
And in that, we were servicing more like supporting the trust officers that were a part of our business. So it was mainly thinking about how can we make the processes better for the trust officers so that they're more equipped to deal with their clients in an efficient manner. Like if someone is struggling, you don't want to give them a 30-page
mm,
document to open their form. Like a lot of what I did in one of my major projects was I cut all of their account opening forms in half. Like I removed everything. Like it was bare bones.
yeah,
And they were really happy with that. I was like, well, I'm happy to do
yeah,
it, right?
yeah.
But still, I wanted more client interaction because the people who we were servicing were still internal. So then I move on to S&T. And S&T, in the group that I'm a part of, Equity Structured Solutions, it's a very interesting part because I'm a part of the distribution side, so I'm part of the sales team. Um, but our product is very customized. People will come to us with terms. I want my investment this long. I have X amount of $1 million or hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I want this return and I want this index. I don't know if you're familiar with structured notes, and I won't go into it too much, but you have an underlying asset like the S&P 500, and then it's basically something in between of an equity and a bond where we're providing some safety, but we're also allowing for the benefit of the volatility to increase your investment.
Mhm.
And with that, um, you have a lot of different clients. Like apart from equity cash, for example, with equities, the layman, like me and you, we can buy a stock on our phone. So the people that are going to BMO are like hundreds of millions of dollars they need moved now, right? Whereas because we have such a specific product that's not open to the public, like it's not just you can't just buy it on your phone. You have to talk to someone. Um, we have more specific clientele. So the team that I'm working on with right now actually services, we sell our equity structured solutions to investment counselors within like BMO. So they are our clients. So it's less that before I was supporting them, now we're selling to them, So it's like,
Yeah.
it's very interesting and it's great too because I'm like investment counselors are dealing with they're like money managers, right? They're dealing with like millions and billions of dollars and you're giving them like you're making $1 million transactions and it's so like riveting
Mhm.
and you like constantly have to like you're pricing for individual, you're like catering to the client. You want to make their like investment how they want it to be. It's a very fulfilling, interesting business.
Yes, I'm glad you talked about the sales centric, aspect of it where you're catering to their needs, right? And it sounds like it's
Mhm.
very fast paced, high stakes, dealing with millions, billions of dollars, right? How would you kind of like what have you learned about, sales and like persuading people through your experiences?
One thing that I have learned is that it doesn't matter what you know. It doesn't matter like how smart you are or anything, because if you can't properly communicate for your audience, it is irrelevant. You can be the smartest. For example, if you're in IT, if you're in IT and you're like a CTIO, you are incredibly well versed and experienced in your field. But the people that get those good, really good positions and who are able to properly service people and give people a good experience is because they are taking complex products or complex ideologies and they're providing you something that you can take in at your level, any level. Like you can, I know that there are salespeople on my team that are dealing with um, people inside of the bank branches who maybe don't have as much experience with different types of products. Maybe they're more interested in like mutual funds, right? So you have to cater to them. And then you can also be dealing with institutional investors that have, or hedge funds who they've done this. They've done this for 20 years. Like you need to provide it to them too. So my biggest value added or like learning in being in sales or even having any of my jobs was you need to know how to communicate what you're learning and what you're doing to people at any level.
Right. Hmm.
That's what matters most.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's huge. And like you said, like any field, not even just business, personal life, things like that. It's kind of like those YouTube videos. Have you seen where it's like you explain it at like five different levels, like a very
Yeah,
complex kind of thing, right? And we talked a little bit about inclusion, diversity, things like that, and it's not really a secret that there's an underrepresentation of minorities, people of color, women in finance, right? What does it kind of mean to you? To be a woman in finance and kind of be like a trailblazer in what you're doing.
honestly, one thing that was a huge eye opener was when I told people that I got this position, countless people came to me, Maya, like you need to like prepare yourself. It's going to be like a boys' club. There's going to be yelling and throwing and anger and just constantly like there's going to be misogyny and racism and like homophobia, misogynistic like ideations, like all of these things, right? And the second I stepped on the floor, I have never met a more diverse group. I have never met a smarter group. I have never met a more intentionally passionate group. The greatest thing about sales and trading is that you are constantly on edge. You are never safe. I actually um I have a I get a bracelet for each internship that I've
Hmm.
done,
Yeah.
and the one that I bought for sales and trading was a golden handcuff. And that was because everyone said it's a golden handcuff because you're making a good amount of money. You also can't leave because you don't know what's going to happen like constantly. So you always have to be like locked in,
Hmm.
right? But because it's such a revenue generated, intense, competitive environment, facts don't care about your feelings. No one cares about what color you are, what race you are. Like, that's the same thing,
Yeah.
but no one cares about anything. You just need to make money. And that's one thing that I was so happy about was like, I always thought, oh, everyone used to tell me, there's like finance bro with the vest and all that
Yeah.
stuff. There was like, I know like five. Everyone is so like, you need to be at such a high level in order to get those positions and maintain that level where you can't just fake it by being a white guy.
Mhm.
You have to make money.
Yeah.
So I'm continuously impressed by the amount of diversity that is there because the other thing is I was raised to be to value meritocracy
Hmm.
and working for the position that you get. And I can see everyone that I'm working with, they're working for the job that they had.
Hmm.
So for diversity,
Yeah.
I think that I'm way more to the opinion that I know that everyone there deserves it, and that's what
Hmm.
matters most. And I'm
Hmm.
seeing it,
Yeah.
there's women and there's people of color, so I'm
Yep.
happy.
Yeah, that's great to hear. I'm glad you talked about, creating this culture, it starts from the top, I guess, right? Like the leadership really dictates the culture. And I'm kind of interested. You touched on a little bit before. You want to go into, running your own business, that kind of thing, and you talked about this leadership. Are those still aspirations that you have? To run your own business with such a great culture, and do you have any other aspirations?
One thing that I've learned from my club actually is that I really need to build my management skills. I have an amazing team, but also like having a full-time job and running a team is kind of a lot. So, one thing that I would for sure do before exploring like my leadership or my passion for like starting a business or my entrepreneurial spirits is I need to get corporate management experience. I need to be in a position where I have to feel accountable. I have to like get feedback. Um, and that's one thing that I really want to focus on like next. I think there is still a possibility that I would want to start my own business, but that would be like way farther in the future because honestly, I did not expect that I would love this business so much. I did not expect to be so fulfilled. This week I was very sick and I didn't go in. I only went in on Monday and I was like very sick, right? And they were like, "Oh my, like don't come in. Like I don't want you to feel any worse." I have a commute of like over an hour, right?
Mhm.
So it makes it a little bit difficult, but there's every day where I wanted to go in, dead sick, and be excited. Like when the whole situation was happening with like the tariffs and they were officially announced, I was also sick that day. It made me feel worse because I wasn't there to see it unfold on the trading floor. Like I really want to take advantage of the time that I have on like the trading floor if it may be limited because, the biggest thing as a woman too is you need to think about if you want to have kids and maternity leave and how that's going to affect your career. So for right now, I want to maximize all the time I can being on the trading floor. And then after that, I might think about going back to carpentry.
Mhm. Great to hear. I'm glad you talked about, the gender differences that exist, right? Because it's a
Yeah.
real, concern that needs to kind of be talked about a little bit more. I think it's very taboo and that kind of thing. So you talked about, being accountable, being driven, being competitive, being like a very kind person, but also, the meritocracy part, succeeding in what you do, right? Is there any other kind of like traits that you want to kind of be known for? Like, what do you want kind of your legacy to be?
I hope that, I want to be respected, but I also want when people think about me, I want them to think like, oh, Maya was really nice.
Mhm.
Like I have been on a huge networking journey ever since the start of Schulich, like what, 3 years ago. And as much as I could harp on people's careers and everything, I wanted them to see me as the type of person that would remember that they're vegetarian.
Yeah.
I wanted to be the person that's like, like that was so kind that Maya did that. And that's one thing that I've been trying to be more intentional about is like it takes absolutely nothing to mention something, like at all, like compliment someone. As much as I want to be respected, um, I won't be nice to someone who doesn't respect me. But like I want someone to know that I'm nice and like someone to be respected because
Mhm.
that was one thing that I was really dealing with when I was getting into this finance industry. There was a couple people, a couple men actually that I felt disrespected me and didn't respect my career trajectory. I remember I told some of my people at school that I had got this position and I was thrilled. Like I was so happy. And then a week later, one of them, I'm not his friend. Um, he told me that I was a diversity hire. And
Ooh,
I
yeah.
I did not react well, but I don't care. One thing about me is I always try my best to be nice,
Mm,
and I know that everything that I have gotten, I deserved.
mm, mm,
So I just hope that people respect me and that I'm nice.
yeah. Hmm.
I don't really care for people to think that I'm competitive or this or that,
Mm,
right? Although it's true.
mm,
Um, I just hope people's hearts are warmed when they talk about me.
I think that's, super valuable piece of advice for anyone, right? Just be nice, be thoughtful. People who remember the small details are, it's always great to hear that about other people. Second last question for you. What would you tell your like grade 10, grade 11, grade 12 self, looking back now?
Nothing. I
Well,
honestly I am the type of person, and I've always been raised this way because I'm also Buddhist, to really expect nothing and accept everything, you know? And I have zero regrets. Like maybe I would do my hair differently.
yeah, yeah,
Or maybe I would um, cool it with like some of my makeup or something, but I'm happy with how I treated people. I'm happy with like how went about certain decisions, and I did the best I could. I always tried to do the best that I could. Um, so honestly, I would say good job.
yeah,
I
yeah.
would say good job and keep going.
Hmm.
Like
Yeah.
if anything, but yeah, maybe cooler with the hair.
Very honest answer. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And I think it's, worked out quite well for you. So, I'm glad that there are no regrets. So, final question for you here. If you could nominate any number of Pet grads to be on the podcast, who would they be?
I would nominate Thureen Silva and Robinson Meng. Two of the smartest people I've ever met, two of the kindest, most humble people I've ever met. And also, Benny Wu. You're so smart, and I am so glad I had you in data management. I hope you're able to make the time to be on the podcast.
Thank you so much for your time. It was great talking to you about, your journey into finance.
Mm.
You talked about doing more research, super important. But I'm glad you talked about, skills you need, to work in what's traditionally known as a cutthroat industry, very high paced, highly competitive industry. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you everyone so much for watching, and we'll see everyone next week. Peace out.
Yeah.